what do people need to do week one after the death of a loved one?
So there are going to be personal and financial matters that are going to need to be considered. So on the personal side, obviously, this is a very difficult situation. We need to give ourselves time and grace and time to grieve and be with family. So definitely wanting to spend time with your family and, hug and go through those memories about your loved one. But you also need to concern yourself with funeral details. So this is probably going to be, with that close family unit that you have, but maybe it's also some close friends. So you want to notify these relatives and family members. You're going to want to put together an obituary. So that's where you're going to gather together as a family and talk about things that your loved one did in their lives. And, did they work? What was important to them? And obviously list that to be able to give to the newspaper. And then also, if the deceased person has any young children or any pets, you're definitely going to need to arrange for care there immediately. And then have a friend or even a house sitter watch the home. That's going to be important, especially if that person's no longer in the home. And even during the funeral, which I think some people don't think about. But if you aren't at that home during the funeral and just even during the first couple of weeks of the loved one's passing, we don't want someone to notice that no one's home and for any possible, shenanigans to go on at the home. So it's
no shenanigans.
No shenanigans. We don't want anybody getting in the house or messing with the house. So definitely having someone kind of keep an eye on that house and remove those valuables from the home too, if they're not in the house. So especially if you think about jewelry, expensive jewelry, or other really important valuables, maybe removing those from the home as well and taking them to someone else's home in the family, I think is a good idea. Putting together a list of flowers and cards and donations and other expressions of sympathy is a good idea. And then accepting help, Nick, from friends and family. Again, if they have a child, if they have a pet, if someone wants to bring meals over for dinners, for lunches, or cook for you, answering phone, helping people get to and from places. And then if you have family coming in out of town, hopefully another family member can arrange for them to stay in a hotel or even invite them in their home so that they have somewhere to stay. I think that's really important. And then after the funeral, a lot of times people do an after service luncheon. So you're going to need to arrange that as well. So those are going to be on the personal side, some personal things that need to be handled. Let's talk about financially. What do you need to do? Well, you're going to need to contact a funeral director or memorial society in order to arrange that funeral. And also, you're going to need to arrange the donation of the body. If you're going to maybe work with a medical school, if your loved one wanted, the body to be available to do that, that's going to need to happen. And then decide what type of elements you want in that funeral service. Hopefully, at the passing of your loved one, you've already had these conversations, but sometimes not. If it's a sudden death, unexpected, especially, quite early and the loved one isn't older and they haven't really thought through these things, then you're going to need to work through those things. But hopefully you've had these conversations and you kind of know what your loved one already wants. If they're a veteran, contact your local veterans of foreign wars or American Legion, because they might be able to provide you with an honor guard for a military funeral, which is really cool and really special. So I think that's really important if they're a veteran. And then notify the deceased person's employer to be able to arrange for benefits for the beneficiaries and check to see if they participated in any kind of company retirement or pension plans. And then I'd say lastly, after that first week, is notify all the insurance companies. So this is going to include life insurance, your home insurance, accident, Medicare, long-term care insurance, credit card balance, any auto loans, those types of things. You're going to want to contact these companies, and then they will send you the claim forms and instructions. And then, Nick, I think you had an important thing that you added as far as beneficiaries. What's important to consider there?
Yeah, so I think it's always important to remember that the beneficiary designations always trump the will. If it's a joint account with you and the deceased, that is now solely your account, regardless of what the will says. If there's an IRA that has beneficiary designations and it lists Jack and Diane as the beneficiaries, that's who gets the money, regardless of if the will says everything goes to Kelly. Beneficiary designations always win.
That's right. Which leads us to the will. You need a copy of that will and any other estate planning documents that your loved one has, and make sure to get a notarized copy. So typically the wills are going to be filed with the family attorney. Maybe they're going to be in a lockbox or a safety deposit box, might be in a drawer in their home office. Hopefully you know where that is in advance, but you definitely are going to want a copy of that. And then you're going to want to order probably at least 10 certified copies of the death certificate. And I know that sounds like a lot, but if you think about like different insurance companies and different organizations that you're going to be contacting, they are going to want a copy of that death certificate. So you're going to need a lot of those copies. Your funeral director might be able to help you order those as well. So you can ask that funeral director about those death certificates. And then a couple other things too, Nick. As you're receiving mail, incoming mail, you're not going to probably be going through the mail, that first week, but just set it aside in a pile so that you can go through it at a later date. But this will prevent losing bills and checks and just confusing things in that first week. So just set those aside in a box. You can go through those at a later date. And if you can, make a photocopy of some of the outgoing business mail that you might send out, because again, it's an emotional time and you might forget what you already did, what you already mailed out if you don't make a copy of it. So I think those are important things to do. And some other important things, other to-dos, Nick, I think when you're making those arrangements with your funeral home, keep in mind that the average funeral can be between $7,000 and $10,000. It's definitely not inexpensive. So hopefully the family has some funds set aside for this, but really having a way to control those costs with the funeral is to don't go alone, go with some family members or a close friend who might be less emotionally involved than you are at that time to be able to make these arrangements, because you might want to do every single thing that the funeral director recommends, but maybe that's not the best thing. So if you kind of have an outsider or someone less emotionally involved coming in, they can help you really logically think through this as well and not just emotionally. I think that's important. And then processing those insurance policies with the claim paperwork is going to happen soon thereafter too.
Just a couple of notes from my recent experience, because I think it's kind of fun to put some practical input here. I think the funeral cost, you can actually Google like your town and average funeral cost. And one thing that I have found is that, where my family member passed away in rural southern Illinois, there's only one funeral home in town or in that town. So they can charge whatever they want. So my mom, who was the executor, basically said no to like all of the add-ons and just bare bones funeral. And it was really close to $15,000.
Oh my word. Yes.
Yeah. But if they charge $25,000, I mean, you can't really say no to it. And they know they're the only game in town. I live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, pretty metropolitan area. There are a lot of different funeral homes that somebody could use, for a funeral. So one thing as you think about your own situation and where you live, call your local funeral home as part of your planning and get an idea of what the cost of a funeral would cost today.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially with a small town, small community. It might be a monopoly where you're just getting what you're getting. And so for your mom to be able to, we're just going to do bare bones. This is going to work for our family. We don't have to do all the bells and whistles. That can be a really hard decision because it is an emotional time, but doing some homework in advance of your area, how much things cost, is good to get an idea.
Another thing that was interesting too was the obituary in the newspaper.
Okay.
So to put an obituary in the newspaper was going to cost roughly $400 for like the small, just kind of square, so-and-so died type of thing, date of birth, date of death. That's, not like the cool story. The funeral home did an online obituary, that people shared on social media, and it was $80.
No kidding.
So we opted to do the online obituary because it was 20% of the cost, but $80 is probably what most people thought they would spend for, to put it in the newspaper. So the newspaper has gotten very expensive.
Wow. And I would imagine more people are doing that, Nick, where they're opting for the online version instead of newspaper.
And it's really nice because you can see people's comments and stuff. Like, the matriarch of our family, she was a teacher. And, there's probably over 100 of her former students that, chimed in and oh, I loved her. She made such an impact on my life. So, I mean, you get a little bit more bang for your buck, I think, as a family member to get to see some of those, stories and comments that you wouldn't see had you just put it in the newspaper.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Then you've got those memories. That's really special.
Yeah. And I have it bookmarked. So that's cool. Something that you can keep with you. I don't think they take it down. And then another nugget, you mentioned like the will and the important documents. Yeah. As a financial planner, we do our best to get a copy of all of our clients' documents. Mm-hmm. And then we keep them in the cloud, whether it's the will, the power of attorney, medical directive. Like, it's really important that somebody else, maybe outside of your family, has a copy of those documents. Yeah. Because you never really know when you're going to need them. And about 2 years ago, I had a potential client. It was actually the sister of a client whose husband was diagnosed with dementia. He was just got moved to a home. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I know that we have our estate planning documents. I have no idea where my husband put them. Well, we contacted the attorney who wrote the documents, and he said, hey, I did those documents over 15 years ago. We don't have a file in the office for him. Oh, geez. So she's like, well, Larry kept everything in a barn. It's like, all right. So I go out there, and it's a huge barn that's probably, 100 by 40. I mean, it's like a small basketball stadium with boxes, and it was about 90 degrees. And after 3 or 4 hours, I found their estate planning documents. Wow. All she knew is that they were in a blue binder.
Oh my gosh. Digging through boxes after boxes.
Boxes after boxes. It was well over 100 degrees inside that barn with no air movement, but we found the documents.
Oh my gosh.
The point of this is you can keep those things in the cloud with a trusted partner, whether it's, someone like you, a financial planner, a CPA. Right. It's important that somebody else have a copy of those things because you never know what life's going to throw at you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You can misplace them or forget them. Or what if that barn burned down? Then you no longer have that copy. Yeah. Having it in the cloud. Yeah. Great.
And it has to be notarized, right? Yes. I mean, an unnotarized document is not a document.
No, it's no good. It's not going to do you any good. Yeah. Good point, Nick.